This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and say hello to my little friend here. This is for those of you who are making jokes about the new Alienware 15 being a big, thick machine. Well, here we have the serious stuff, a real gaming laptop. One of the ones to beat for 2015, actually. This is the MSI GT72 Dominator Pro G. Enough little letters and words in the name for you there. What that means is we have NVIDIA G-Sync inside here, and this is a 17.3-inch laptop. I think you could probably figure that out by now. So this is a full-size gaming rig. It competes with the Asus Republic of Gamers G751, also available with G-Sync. A couple of other supersized machines. It's obviously bigger even than an Alienware 17, but it's going to be one of the ones to beat right here because it has Intel Broadwell 5th generation CPUs. They were almost a no-show this year for the quad-core gaming laptops, but MSI has been really just revving it quick and trying to get cutting edge with that. We have the NVIDIA GTX 980M, something that you'll generally only see in 17-inch machines because it requires so much wattage and so much cooling. Occasionally, like in the Alienware 15, you'll find it there too, but not in the super skinny ones. This is an 8.4-pound laptop, so it is a lot to carry around, but hey, if you go to the gym like me, it's not so bad. Weighs about a pound, 1.1 pounds more than the Alienware 15 we just reviewed. So actually, in terms of weight, as a 17-inch gaming laptop goes, or even some of the mobile workstations, that's not that bad. It's obviously not skinny. It is something you could carry around, but you're going to need a pretty big backpack. But that's really not so much what this is about. This is your killer gaming machine. This is a desktop replacement. This has a big 17-inch IPS display, so it's all the creature comforts of using a desktop. It's something that you could pick up, at least carry from room to room, even if it might be a little big and heavy to carry, well, back and forth to class. We're going to look at it now. So here it is, living large. You know, seeing it like this, actually, it doesn't even look all that thick in a way. It just looks like a laptop in a different scale, or you can't tell because it's not next to another laptop. We'll bring in some for comparison so you can get an idea of the size. Anyway, MSI GT72 Dominator Pro, the new G-Sync model with Intel Broadwell inside. So this is the hot new laptop from MSI for you full-size gamers out there. Well, you're not full-size, your laptop is. Anyway, it's got about everything you could possibly want on this, and it's available in two price points right now. Now, MSI is really good at having a GT72-066-214, and it gets very confusing. It just different amounts of RAM, different amounts of SSD capacity, all that sort of thing. They're otherwise the same thing, but right now they're starting out with two models. We're looking at the higher end model that has the NVIDIA GTX 980M with 4 gigs of DDR5 VRAM. That is currently the fastest mobile GPU available from NVIDIA. That one is $20.99, and there's also for $1,500 one with the GTX 970M. One step down, still a pretty powerful graphics card. One thing I will say is the 17.3-inch chassis affords the room for adequate cooling for the 980M. So if you really want the 980M, I would really lean towards a 17-inch chassis. I know there's some out there with 15 inches, and it's just it's a tougher thing to deliver the cooling that's necessary and keep the machine fairly quiet. Like the Asus Republic of Gamers G751 and the 750 before it, this guy runs very cool. When they're this large and this thick, which is 1.89 inches, there is plenty of room for large fans that aren't going to make a lot of turbulence. So you're not going to hear a lot of "yee." So they're quiet, they're cool, they're actually pretty huge. The fans are about, that big in here. So this is one of those desktop replacements that's actually cool enough to put on your lap. Even when you're gaming, it doesn't get all that hot. Interesting proposition, that, because it's funny, I've been playing with the Alienware 15, 2015 model that we just reviewed recently, and that one weighs 7 pounds because it's a 15-inch machine. The Alienware 17 weighs about the same as this, which is around 8.3 pounds or so. But I have to use a laptop cooler with that because it's very hot on the bottom, so it ends up weighing as much as this on my lap because I don't need a laptop cooler. So there's the explanation for those who don't understand why these big machines exist. There are other reasons as well. Lots and lots of ports. And as we turn it around, on the side here, we have two USB 3.0 ports over there. This is the optical drive. This is a Blu-ray drive. So yes, we still get an optical drive, while some manufacturers are slimming down and smallifying as much as they can. One of the first things to go is the optical drive. So those of you who actually feel like you need that beyond game installs, well, it's there for you. And of course, you avid gamers who are always getting new games, if somehow you're actually still buying boxes and not using Steam, Origin, Uplay, all those services, well, there it is. And for traditional Blu-ray movies too. Again, for those of you who aren't streaming. It's going the way of the dodo bird, but for now, it still has its uses. Giant fans over here with little red decor going on. 2 mini display ports. Full-size HDMI. Gigabit Ethernet. This is killer 2200 Ethernet. And this is where you plug in your power supply. Good news here, 230 watt power brick, which is what it should be for something that has the GTX 980M. Dell, Alienware, yes, we're picking on you for those 180 watt power supplies that you're using now, which don't make much sense with the 980 graphics card. On this side here, wait, there's more. We got 6 USB ports total. You're going to have to think about things you're going to plug in there at that point, huh? 2 conventional USB 3.0 ports, and this is USB 3.1. Instead of using the USB-C connector, they're traditional style connectors right there. So a little forward thinking there. For audio ports, when we see separate headphone and mic jacks, we're pretty jazzed. When you see 4 ports, you start to hit the manual and say, what are all those for? One of them is the headphone combo with SPDIF jack. There's a microphone jack. There's a dedicated line in and a dedicated line out. So if you use the headphone jack, it's the front channel for stereo. If you're going to use surround sound, you want to use the line out jack. So that's what all of your audio jacks are for. And then there's an SD card slot compatible with high capacity cards. On the bottom, genuine plastic here, but durable stuff. Now, you know, I'll say one thing about MSI. They don't have quite the style of certainly an Alienware or Razer. Of course, Razer is making really thin products. That's part of what makes them look so lovely and beautiful. Even, it depends what you like, Asus versus this. They're both big monsters, 2 different aesthetics. But anyway, liberal use of sturdy plastics here. Here's our subwoofer. So you have a 2.1 system. You have stereo speakers, the usual Dyaudio. Some of the best speakers you're going to hear on a laptop, honestly, just very loud and very full. Now, they did switch from Creative Cinema 2, which is what MSI used to use in the gaming laptops, over to Nahimic, who knows how you say that. Some people don't like that software as much in terms of the audio quality. I think it still sounds pretty darn good, and you really can't, sadly, go back to the Sound Blaster Cinema 2 if you want Realtek chip in here, and once you update the Realtek drivers, you're going to have to stick with the new offering. A little hard to read here, but this is the usual MSI void if removed sticker over here. This covers 1 screw hole. With MSI, they don't really mean it unless you screw it up when you open it up. If it's broken inside because you broke off the ears for the RAM holder or something like that, you know, then they're going to pick on you. Otherwise, no, they're not going to. That said, the vendor that loaned us this for review has asked us not to remove it, so we're not going to be able to show you the internals. But one thing I can tell you is, unlike the GS60 Ghost Pro, which is a super slim and light 15.6-inch gamer, this one has a lot more room, so it's pretty easy. Just unscrew the screws here, you lift off this top, and you have slots and spots galore. This has an MXM graphics card slot, so the graphics card is actually upgradable. Now, those cards tend to be kind of expensive and not so easy to source, so I'm not so sure if I would rather have that or the Alienware graphics amplifier approach, which is pretty darn easy. The external box that you can just pop a desktop graphics card in. This guy does not have a graphics amplifier port, unlike the smaller model that MSI offers that does have that feature. Anyway, lots of grills and vents here. What you have inside is 4 M.2 slots. Now, depending on what you get in the way of SSD storage from the factory, those are often set up in RAID 0 configuration. So 2 of the slots face up and are pretty easy to access. There's a little card that mounts that holds them. You take the card off to get to the other 2 slots if you actually want to go all the way up to 4. There's a 2.5-inch standard drive bay, which comes popular with the 7200 RPM hard drive. You can put in a 2.5-inch SSD if you want in there. That's an easy way to just get faster, larger storage area for your games. The wireless card, which is a killer 1525 wireless AC card, is also socketed M.2 slot. And we have 4 RAM slots in here, so you can go up to 32 gigs. And if you're into those 16 gig modules that we've talked about, well, you can go even higher. But I think, honestly, the 16 gigs that this ships with is really adequate for just about anybody, even a power user. All right, let's open it up and take a look inside. Here we have a 17.3-inch IPS panel. This is an LG IPS panel that's used in an awful lot of 17-inch laptops. Unfortunately, you know, with 15 inches, you get a lot of choices, a lot of display manufacturers, and you can get it in a variety of manufacturer styles, whether it's PLS, whether it's IPS, you know, going up to 4K resolution. Those choices just aren't around for the 17 inches. So this is 1920 by 1080, which, honest to goodness, is actually a fine resolution for making everything readable at 100% scaling, or no scaling required whatsoever. And it's also very good setting for games, which really are mostly still intended to be run at 1080p resolution, especially when you've got a mobile graphics card. Even the GTX 980M 4GB is a strong card, and it can drive some games at 4K if you want to use a 4K monitor with this, but 1080p just makes an awful lot of sense. Again, we have G-Sync on board as well. Now, this display is not a touch panel, and it is a matte panel, which I personally like because, well, you don't actually have to look at a reflection of yourself all the time when you're using the laptop, which I think is more noticeable on a bigger display, but that's up to you. Some people do like glossy because it increases the sense of contrast and it makes colors look a little bit wet and more luscious. Anyway, I like matte. It's up to you. The panel has 93% of sRGB coverage. You know, usually for our high-end machines, we see 99. 93 to 99 is not a huge deal. I wish it was a little higher. It's certainly not up there with the 4K Dell IPS display on the Alienware 15, but even Dell doesn't have anything like that for the Alienware 17, and this is every bit as good as what you're going to find on the Asus ROG G751, which is really using the same panel anyway. Refresh rate 75 Hz to go with that NVIDIA G-Sync. For Adobe RGB, it covers 72%. Again, 74-75% would be what we see on some of the higher-end laptops, particularly on Ultrabooks. So just a little bit short of that, but it's still very nice. For those of you who don't know, we use the Spider 4 Pro colorimeter to measure all of this stuff right here, and these are the result screens that you're seeing. So you see brightness is 323 nits, which is extremely bright for a 17-inch panel. That's certainly very nice and pleasing, and also, given the fact, again, that it's matte, it just seems a lot brighter because it doesn't have to fight glare. In our office, it was funny, we had folks who were just saying, turn down the brightness, it's so bright. That's a nice problem to have. Black levels are not as exciting at 0.48, and that's measured when the display is set to maximum brightness. Contrast ratio, respectable, is 670 to 1, as you can see there. So overall, it's a pretty good panel. It's good enough even if you're a graphic designer, if you process photographs like I do, if you're doing some 1080p video, it's certainly adequate for that. Now, how about the keyboard and the trackpad? MSI uses the SteelSeries gaming keyboard, which is a chiclet style keyboard, as you can see here. Good key travel, very nice and deep. Multi-zone LED backlighting. You can probably just barely see the colors right now because our studio lighting is so good. If I turn up sideways, you'll see the light come in a little bit. So it's programmable. There's a button right here. We have 4 buttons to control different things, and the bottom one will cycle it through a bunch of different color effect settings there. So for those of you who like the multi-zone lighting, you got it. And there's also a light that lights up around the trackpad right here. The keyboard, just say a few more things. Obviously, you get the number pad right here. The key caps, the heads of the keys themselves, seem a little bit small for a laptop this size. It's kind of weird, not much really bigger than the Ghost GS60, which is 15.6 inch. That said, it's a very wonderful keyboard to type on. It's just crisp, it has good travel, it's good for gaming as well. I like it a lot, but for some of you who might like giant key surfaces or just something bigger than this, keep it in mind. If you can try it in the store, do try it. Anyway, very responsive, very even. I don't have any problem with the space bar feeling any different than any other key, which is sometimes a problem on laptops. One thing MSI continues to do is put the Windows key in a weird place, so they do have software that lets you swap it with the FN key. If you want to, I guess you could pull these off maybe and swap them so you're not confused by looking at it. So that's kind of weird, and the delete key is up over here. Okay, it's a little weird, but everything else is completely normal, so I'm not going to complain too much. This trackpad, MSI used to have some of the most god-awful trackpads, and they've gone from using Elan to Synaptics, which usually is a better thing. That said, I still wasn't so super impressed with it, mostly when it came to two-finger scrolling. It just seemed to sometimes have a desire to ignore me when I did that. The zooming works really well on it, and I actually did get one BIOS update already, and that did seem to improve it. So it's not bad, it's just not among the best, which is, for MSI, actually an improvement. It's usable. It has discrete clicker buttons, which are very stiff. I wish they were a little bit softer, honestly, so I tend to use the tap to click whenever I can instead. They're just too stiff. The trackpad surface is, however, a little bit odd insofar as it's continuous with the keyboard deck, so you don't have any tactile indication of when you've wandered off to the wrong place. You have the LED line here as a visual to give you a hint, but that's a little bit weird. It's big enough that I actually haven't really wandered off to the side, but it's MSI's current design choice to use that. So keyboard, I say, really very good, top-notch, multi-zone backlighting, all that stuff. Trackpad, better than it used to be, still not one of the top trackpads on their Windows. By the way, this ships from the factory with Windows 10. So you're at the cutting edge here. You got that Broadwell CPU, you got Windows 10, you've got G-Sync installed. It's pretty hot stuff. One last thing, we got some more buttons over here. If you want to manually override the fans and go to max fan, there's a button for that. I have not really found it necessary. You've got a button to launch an application right here. You have the switchable graphics button right there. That's right. Instead of using NVIDIA Optimus, and this has to do with G-Sync, I'm told, if you want to switch between the dedicated and integrated graphics, you use the button and you have to reboot the computer, which is a pretty quick process, but you do have to reboot it. The good news is there's no more, oh, look at that, it's switching, it thinks it needs dedicated graphics when you're trying to do something simple like edit a quick photo in Photoshop, when really the Intel HD integrated graphics are adequate for that. So it's going to save some battery power. We'll talk about battery later. Last one. Power button. Now for a little size and thickness comparison, let's start out with something wildly, well, cruel almost first. This is the MSI Ghost Pro GS60. Now the Stealth Pro, which is the 17-inch, would be, in terms of footprint, probably the better comparison. And the Ghost Pro is a little bit bigger because it has a number pad. 15-inch laptops usually don't, so they actually made a bigger chassis. And I'm sure they didn't mind having the extra cooling. This has the NVIDIA GTX 970M. It is a skinnier machine. There's no way they could do the 980. So you can see the difference in, well, skinniness, but the same lid design and the same aesthetic prevails here. So this is what they look like in terms of difference. So the GS60, the Ghost Pro, is a really sweet machine, but one thing I can tell you is that you will really hear the fans and you're going to feel the heat when you are gaming. That's the price you pay for any of the super thin and light gaming laptops with high-end graphics cards inside, be it the Ghost Pro or the Razer, or, you know, the HP Omen 15 even though it has lower end graphics, the 960M, and they're all going to get a bit toastier. The Ghost Pro can get pretty loud, certainly. Even the Alienware 15 we're going to bring in next is a bit louder, more than a bit louder than the Dominator, but it's certainly a lot quieter than the Ghost. And here's that Alienware 15. So for those of you who are laughing about how thick it is, well, it's actually not that bad. It's 1.34 inches versus 1.89 inches for our big Dominator model here. So you get the difference in size. Now the Alienware 15 is that in-between kind of size where you're going to hear the fan more certainly than you will on the Dominator. You're also going to feel the heat a lot from the vents on the bottom compared to something like the Dominator or the Asus ROG G751. But it's going to be a lot cooler and quieter than something like the MSI GS60 Ghost Pro or the Razer Blade. So how about temperatures and audio? You've got Far Cry 4 running right now over here, and you can hear how loud and full those speakers are, and these are only at 55% volume right now. 3-watt speakers plus the subwoofer going on. It's nighttime here in Far Cry land, so it's a little bit dark. Sorry about that, but you can hear how good the audio is. Another thing that you can't hear is the fan, even though we are plugged in right now, so we're using maximum power. And I'm wearing the microphone, I'm quite close to the unit right now, and you're just not hearing the fan. That's how cool it runs. The keyboard has never gone above body temperature, which is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the point when you start to feel warm. The bottom, likewise, never gets burning hot. You could actually play with this on your lap, especially because the vent is a wedge shape like this. So if you have your leg here and your leg here, you're doing pretty good. So in terms of thermals, the CPU and the GPU typically are running at fairly cool 60s centigrade, which is quite good. And let's alt tab out and look at MSI's utility to see what it says we're doing. So here we are. We just alt tabbed over to the MSI Dragon Gaming Center right here, and you can see with the game running in the background. So we're at about 56 degrees centigrade for the GPU in Far Cry, and this is running at 1080p with everything pretty much set to very high. Some things are on ultra, and our CPU is at 47 degrees. So This is mighty chilling. For those of you who have tried some of the thin and light gaming laptops and you saw your CPU and your GPU temperatures running really high and you didn't like the casing temperatures, well, here's the solution. One of these big desktop monsters with very well-designed cooling. We'll have a separate gameplay demo video so you can see several games running on this and see how they do and see if G-Sync looks better to you as well, but that we'll do in a separate video. So this laptop has the 2.7 gigahertz Intel Core i7-5700 HQ. That is an Intel 5th generation Broadwell chipset, one of the few for the quad-core laptops on the market because Broadwell was so late. Some manufacturers just, well, kind of gave up and didn't go with it. If you go for the $1,500 model, you're still going to get that same CPU. That's just going to have the NVIDIA GTX 970M with 3 gigs of DDR5 VRAM versus this GTX 980M with 4 gigs of DDR5 VRAM. So how are our benchmarks? And again, we have 16 gigs of RAM in here. We have 128 gig boot SSD, that's the C drive, and a 1 terabyte 7200 RPM hard drive in this configuration. Here's our 3D Mark 11 score for the performance mode score. A very impressive 11,032, which is about what you would expect from a machine with this kind of configuration. W prime at computed pi in 10 seconds, which oddly was about a second slower than the last generation Haswell, but hey, stuff happens. Now, in the CloudGate test for 3D Mark, it scored 13,414, which isn't much more than the GTX 970M. It's a funny thing about that test on this. But on Firestrike, it certainly did better with 8,402. Bouncing back to 3D Mark 11 again for the extreme score, 4,243. This is beating the pants off of my 2-year-old gaming desktop rig. It's really kind of ouchy right there. And for PC Mark 8 Home Accelerated, 4,432, which was one of the top scores that we've seen. So this is a very fast machine. This is for gamers. Obviously, this is also for those of you who use pro apps. If you do video production, if you're doing very large raw file photo editing and you're cool with a 1080p display and you're not hoping for a 4K display, I think at 17 inches it's still a very nice environment because the first thing you want is a larger display when working with photos and graphics. For me, that works. For those of you who are compiling a lot of code, if you're doing some CAD work, I mean, this is really not a Quadro. It's not something that's designed particularly for CAD and 3D design work, but it has the horsepower to handle it. This is one of the most powerful laptops on the planet right now. If you can think of a task, it should be able to do it. Let's put it that way. So it's the ultimate desktop replacement that you can actually take with you places. It's a fast puppy. Lastly, there's battery life, which is usually a joke on big gaming laptops, and gee, it's not for a change. And I'll tell you, my MSI Ghost Pro, that little slim GS60, even though that has switchable Optimus graphics, when it switches away from dedicated graphics to Intel, it still doesn't have very good battery life. It's about 3 hours. The Alienware 15 was a real pleasure with Optimus, and it actually could manage 5 to 6 hours running on integrated graphics. And I'm talking for productivity tasks, not mobile gaming. If you're talking mobile gaming, you're looking at an hour and a half on this guy. But really impressively, if you use that little graphics card switching button right there and switch to integrated graphics, and this actually has pretty decent Broadwell generation integrated graphics on it, well, you can actually go for about 6 hours for a mix of productivity work and streaming full HD video. Say you want to stream Netflix or Amazon Prime or something like that, YouTube, whatever it is. It actually can go about 6 hours, which is refreshing. So all in all, yes, it's honking big, but also it has about every creature comfort you could want. It's one of the fastest laptops on the market. You get an IPS display. That is your Dominator GT72, the Pro G model with NVIDIA G-Sync. So that's the MSI GT72 Dominator Pro G. The model just got released here. It's mid-2015, a little after mid-2015 this guy just came out. All the bells and whistles you could ask for. Ports, more ports, even USB 3.1 in here. Multiple mini display ports, of 17-inch IPS display with G-Sync. The NVIDIA GTX 980M, a fast quad-core Broadwell CPU. What more could you ask for, right? So if you're looking for a full-size gaming laptop, a powerful rig, something that's also incidentally very good for pro apps and video editing, well, this one certainly is one of the top choices on the market. It's not alone. Of course, like I said, there's the Asus ROG G751. There's some of the boutique brands as well, but honestly, you get You got a lot of good stuff here for your money, and it's pretty upgradable too, including the graphics card. Hey. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to visit our website for the full written review and hit that like and subscribe button too.